Now here is where, if you take your time and do a little extra pinning, you will save yourself a lot of fretting and a lot of worry. So because I know the shape of what I need, I'm going to put my right sides together, lay it against here, and then I just like to go ahead and pin it at a 1/4 inch seam. This is a little extra step, and that gives me the assurance that I need that it's going to actually cover the pattern correctly. So when I hold it up to the light, and I can see whether it has covered my pattern piece, and that's what I'm looking for. And it does. Now, because I'm going to sew actually on the paper side, I cannot leave those 2 pins in there. They were just to make sure that I had this at the right place. In other words, I don't want to lay this triangle way up here, because then it's not going to cover my whole section of number 2 here that I need covered. So I want to lay it down closer down to the bottom, and you can see on her diagram here of what that should look like. So I'm going to pin it off to the side, but I need to get this out of the way. I'm going to pin it right here. Right here. Then I'm ready to flip it over, and I'm going to sew right on this line. And you will want to start back here, because this is where we're going to trim it, and this needs to be stitched. So I'm going to start about right in here. I'm going to stitch straight on that line, and I'm going to come past the dotted line. I'm going to come out here. When you stitch with your sewing machine, find a foot that has a closed toe that has some kind of a mark here in the middle, that you know right where that needle is going to hit, because that needle needs to go right on that line. So like a closed toe is what you're looking for. That's what you want for your Alright, so now I'm going to take it over to the sewing machine. I have my right sides together, and I'm sewing on the paper.
Just a second. All right.
And you want to go at a nice, just steady pace. And keep that needle right on that line. And again, you're going straight through your seam and come off of it just a little bit. Okay. Then she says to go ahead, take your pins out, and she says to press this seam open, and I think that does help it lay down a little bit flatter. So I'm going to take this and press that open. Then I'm going to take it and very carefully press that across. And pressing is a very, very important part of paper piecing. You have to get that good and flat. So now I'm ready to take this to a cutting place, and I'm going to cut on my seam line right here. All of those. Don't put a new blade on your rotary cutter because you're going to be cutting paper. You want about at least a 12-inch ruler is nice. That gives you the length that you need for this long cut, but it's not too bulky. You want to tip it off here. Make sure it's all nice and flat as you're cutting. So you'll have 3 long cuts and 2 short cuts. So here's my first. See how messy this is, all these little pieces of paper and fabric laying around. So this is one of 2 that I need to sew. I've got another pair of color 2, like this one here. So I'll use another background piece, and I will do that again the exact same way. And I will do that, repeat with color number 4. And I'll do that twice. So I will have 2 of these and 2 of these. Then you will also do the same thing with colors 1 and 3, except it's just a little different shape. So I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate that one just like I did with colors 2 and 4. So we just finished sewing together this portion of the pattern using color number 2. Now we're going to use this part of the pattern and use color number 1. One thing I failed to tell you earlier was to make sure and decrease your stitch length. That perforates your paper and makes it easier to tear better. So go ahead and decrease your stitch length. I just adjusted the machine here. Take it down noticeably that it's a good bit, your stitches are a good bit shorter than your normal piecing. So now I have the pattern that has been copied over to the paper paper, and I am going to have my background piece that's 5 by 7. I have laid it with the wrong side up, which I'm going to put my pattern down on it, and what I'm watching here is making sure this dotted line is all on the fabric. You can't watch this line. You have to make sure that the fabric is past this dotted line. So this portion is going to get covered by my background, and I have to make sure that that's on there. So I'm going to flip it over again, and I'm going to pin it down, and again I'm going to stay away from my stitching line when I pin. So I'm going to pin up here, stick a couple in there. So now I'm ready to flip it back. Now I'm going to again lay my ruler down on the stitching line and just gently finger press that up against my ruler. I'm going to fold it down, lay my ruler down, and extend the ruler a 1/4 inch past my fabric fold. That line shows me where I'm going to lay down my color number 1. So I'm going to flip it back, and I need to cut my fabric 1 away, or background fabric away. I'll flip it back over, and here is my right side up, right side down, and again I like to pin it and pin it right at about your 1/4 inch seam, and then just lay it over just to double check that it's covering all of what you need to cover. Okay, now see, if I would stitch that, this area right here would not be covered. You see how that's off my fabric? So I have to repin. I have to bring this down further. These two do not have to match at all. What you're watching is this portion, color number 1. So I'm going to bring it down a little bit further now. And again, I will pin it real quick just to make sure. And this time when I lay it over, whoo, I'm really close. I'm going to move it down just a little bit further just to make sure. And then I'm good to go. So I'm going to put my right sides together. Got the edges ready. And I'm not going to pin here again because I'm going to sew there. So I'm going to pin a little bit to the side here and here. So I have my right sides together, and now I'm going to flip, and this is my stitching line. And again, I'm going to start out beyond the dotted line, and I'm going to go past, just a little bit past the dotted line there. And again, I have lowered my stitch length. Bring it over here. Now I'm going to be watching my needle to make sure that it is going to stitch right on that line. Here's where your closed toe on your sewing machine is really important because it gives you, usually has a line there right in the middle of your foot to follow. So I'm going past the dotted line, which is my seam allowance. And see my tiny stitches, they're real little.